Hello. In this video, I'm going to show you the difference between a QuickBooks working file, which has the extension QBW, and a QuickBooks backup file, which has the extension QBB. It's important for you to know the difference, otherwise you're going to get confused in how you're storing and saving your QuickBook files and in how you're opening files. So it is important that you understand the difference. When you start up QuickBooks, your first screen tells you that at the moment you've got the QuickBooks software open, but there's no company file open at this point. And so QuickBooks needs to know what it is that you want to do. Most of the time when we come into QuickBooks, we want to open or restore an existing company. We will, in one of our classes, learn how to create a company from scratch, but usually once you've created a company, from that point forward, you would go in and just open that existing company data file, and you would just continually work on that one file. Also in QuickBooks, we can open the sample files that allow us to practice using QuickBooks. So I'm just going to click up here. QuickBooks keeps track of all the most recently used company files. So rather than clicking down here and going through my system to find my files, I'm just going to click here and open an existing file that I've been working on. It tells me that it's a sample file, so it wants to make sure that I don't use that as a company file because it's got records already set up in it. So here's the difference. You open an existing data file, you do your work, you're entering bills, you're receiving payments, you're paying bills, you're maybe processing a payroll, you're adding employees, you're maybe adding customers, adding vendors. On a day-to-day basis, if you were working in QuickBooks, you probably would use many of these buttons on the home screen to do your work throughout the day. And as we learned in a previous video, every time you finish with a form, that's a screen that opens whenever you choose one of the buttons. So this here is called a form. Every time we finish with a form and click Save and New or Save and Close, then that work that we've done on that form is automatically saved. So when we're finished our work for the day, it has saved our work as we've gone along, and all we do is click on the X to exit out of it. And then the next day we just come back in, open that data file, and continue to work once again. However, there are times when we might want to create a backup copy of our data files because the data file can become pretty extensive if you think about it. If you think about all the work that's done day by day in a company, and all you have is one copy of that file, that could be pretty dangerous if something were to happen to the hard drive where it's stored, or the USB where it's stored, or the computer where it's stored. It could be dangerous to lose that file because then you lose all of that financial historical data for your company. So occasionally it's important to create a backup. And so you do that through the File menu, Create a Backup process. And that process, which we'll learn to do in class, allows us to make a second copy of our data file. And it's called a backup because that's the intent, is to have just one working copy of a company file and one backup copy at any given time. So you would walk through the process and then you would save that, usually in a different location from where your initial data file is stored, because you're creating that backup for safekeeping. So that's why initially we had you create two folders on your USB, one to hold your data files and one to hold backup files. Then when you come into QuickBooks, so I'm just going to exit out of here, And I'm just going to start the program up again. When you come into QuickBooks, if you had a problem with your data file, if it got corrupted and you needed to restore it from a backup, you now have a backup company file that you can use to restore. So you would use the same button, but instead you would tell the computer that you're going to restore a backup copy. And then what QuickBooks does is it takes all of that data that it stored in that backup file, so the extension would be the QBB, and it converts it to workable data that you can use within QuickBooks, and then you can keep working on your company files. So there's two types of files in QuickBooks that you can use. One has the extension QBW, which stands for your QuickBooks working files, and that's the type of file that you will work with most often. And then there's a file called the QuickBooks Backup. It has the extension QBB for backup, and you would only use that to restore a company file if there were problems with the initial working file. And that's the difference between a QuickBooks working file and a QuickBooks backup file.